Hey everyone, I got a really exciting show for you today. I have a new series, new weekly series starting with this guest. And in this first episode, we are going to expand our knowledge. We're going to talk about things that I normally don't. But before we get into that, let's welcome the guest to the show. How you doing, Greg Dickerson? How are you?
Doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me, man. How are you? Happy new decade.
Yeah, new decade. Kind of crazy. Thank you for doing this. I know it was kind of a whim, kind of one of those Facebook posts. Hey, anybody want to talk to me weekly? And you're like, I'm game. I like that guy. I'll give that a shot. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. I love what you're doing. Congratulations on the book. I haven't talked to you since you launched it, and I know you're on your way to 1 million copies distributed and sold, and 1 million lives changed. And I mean, that's just awesome, And that's why I'm like, you know what? Let's do this, man. I love giving back, sharing what I've learned over the last 25 years of my career, and I know you love doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I remember your video being titled like "Toolbox and a Truck to a Millionaire" or something like
Yeah,
that. That was a lot of fun. I'll find it and put it in the show notes. That was an awesome interview. Um,
yeah.
why don't we remind folks where you are in the country and what you're doing these days, and then we'll jump into our topic for this week.
Yeah, short story. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C., and I do business all up and down the Southeast coast and serial entrepreneur, real estate developer, investor. And, I buy companies, build them up, sell them. I develop real estate. I am opportunistic. I like heavy lift, value add, and ground up type stuff. And, I do coaching and mentoring. So, it's a lot of fun. It keeps me busy. Like I said, I've been at it since 1997, starting with a truck and a toolbox as a handyman remodeling guy, and built that into a $30 million company and $250 million in real estate deals. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow, that's so impressive. It's so rare that I get to talk to someone that's got me beat. I think you got me beat by like 6 years of experience, right? 97 versus 2003. So I appreciate you. This topic is going to be about stuff that I have no experience in: commercial development, ground up, heavy lift. So why don't we kind of just educate people on what that is first from your perspective, and then I think you have we can flip the camera around and just give them a feel for what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so opportunistic is, versus typical value add or the BRRRR strategy where you buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. You can do that with commercial as well. But what opportunistic is you're coming into more, more risk type projects where they're either ground up, which is risk, development, or you're coming into something that is vacant or mostly vacant, or buildings that are in, deteriorating and need a lot of work. That's what opportunistic is. It's also in the world of business, coming into companies that need help, that need restructuring, and you're opportunistic. You come in and typically pick up something that is distressed and needs a lot of work, a lot of capital, a lot of expertise to turn it around, build it up and grow it. So that's opportunistic investment strategy in a nutshell, versus what you would normally, most people are doing a value add where they buy something, increase their income a little bit, increase the value, or what's called core and core plus, where they're mostly stabilized properties and you've got a little bit of room to, to do something with them. The class, B plus A properties, those are core plus strategies. So, opportunistic is the dirty work, man. That's the stuff that's difficult, that's challenging. And, that's what I cut my teeth on. And to me, it's not really risky. It's what I do, and, what I've done my whole career.
So again, this opportunistic strategy or the heavy lift value add, this again is not something you've morphed into. You've been doing this for decades.
Yeah, I started out as a building contractor, making old buildings new. So I kind of learned it from the ground up. The people that I learned from in my career were developers, doing very large projects. Some of these guys were hundreds of millions of dollars. So to me, it's just the world I grew up in. So I've never been afraid of it, never been worried about it. It's just what I do. It's not really risky.
Yeah. And the other thing I remember from our interview is you're essentially sitting in your office now, right? You've given up no staff, no
Yeah.
building, nothing. You're in your office because you are always out looking for the next challenge or managing projects. And, so why don't you give us a feel for, what's in front of you for 2020? I think you're at one of your projects now. Just give them a taste for what you're doing, and I'll ask some questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to flip the camera around so you can just kind of see some equipment out there, busting the ground up and doing some dirt work. And I'm meeting with a friend of mine later today who's doing a pretty interesting project as well, ground up, with some owner finance. He's doing some little office condos and owner financing them out ground up. So I'm going to make some videos on that later today. But, I like bigger projects. I like challenging projects. And I outsource everything. So on the development side, I don't have a company. I don't self-perform anymore. I've been a general contractor my whole career. So I had a building company. I've always had a staff of about 20 people. So now, I just keep it really lean, with the CFO, and I've got an accountant, attorneys, and I outsource everything now to general contractors, architects, engineers, which I've always used independent architects and engineers. Never really had that in house. I did have design in house at one point early in my career, but yeah, it's all outsourced and leveraged. So what I am is a developer, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a developer. What that means is I create the vision. I bring the team together to execute on that vision. I provide the financing and the funding, and make it happen. So I've got to walk up to that vacant land and have a vision of what that thing can be, and then have the stick-to-itiveness, to be able to bring that home and lead that team and delegate, motivate that team to execute on the vision. So that's what a developer does. Right now the projects that I do, they do not require a full-time staff because I don't do a ton of them. I do some bigger projects, 20, 30, 50 million, here and there. So, I can do 6 or 8 of those at one time, all up and down the Southeast region without having a full-time staff, because my staff are independent contractors. It's the architect, engineers, land use attorneys, accountants, and I do have a CFO that tracks all the financials and does the performance and things like that. But other than that, yeah, it's just me.
Very cool. So let's get them a feel. So you showed us when you flip the camera around, there's some vehicle, or I don't know, not vehicles, but some tractors or whatnot moving dirt around, or excavators,
Yeah.
whatever they're called, bulldozers. So what's going on out there? Are you building a single house? Is it tracks? What are we doing?
Yeah, so these are commercial buildings that are for sale. So they're just spec buildings, and some little retail commercial spaces, and nothing huge, but so we're just breaking the ground right now, putting utilities in, water, sewer, things like that, and bringing the buildings out of the ground. And next step will be slabs, and then the steel comes in, you start raising that up. And so it's pretty straightforward. This is just a small project, little infill development project is what I like to call it, where you go into an existing area and you take some land, and you develop something out of the ground. It can be housing, it can be commercial. You can be tearing something down, redeveloping, or you can just be taking a vacant piece of land that's already has road, streets, and a sophisticated or a developed community around it, and you're just filling in the hole. So you take a look at what's around you, what's missing. In this case, we're missing a little retail strip center with a Starbucks, Chipotle, hair cuttery, things like that. So you build these things up, lease them up. You can do the BRRRR strategy. You get it built, you lease it up, you refinance it, and go do it again. So and you can do it one rental at a time. It's just a different level.
Very, very cool. Thanks for the tie-in. That was nice. So give us a feel for what happened before today, right? When did you see the lot? Did somebody bring it to you? How'd you find it? Would you pay cash and then you're going to get a construction loan on it? Give us a feel for the process to today.
Yeah, so this particular project, something I've been watching for a number of years. I've known about the land for a while, and been kind of watching it and waiting for development to happen around it.
Okay.
And so this one here, I come in, I put the land under contract. It's traditional bank financing. You put a 20% down payment on it. The bank finances a construction loan. I hire a general contractor after the entitlement process. So once you put the land under contract, you got to go through first the feasibility. What are your utility requirements, your roads, your DOT, things like that, which all of that was taken care of because this is in a developed area where the roads, everything's already there, access is already there, so we don't have to worry about traffic lights or curb cuts or anything like that. Utilities are already there serving the property, we're just tapping into them. So the entitlement process was pretty simple. The approval process is not so simple. That takes a lot more time depending on where you're at. This one here is in North Carolina. So when you're in that Raleigh, Cary, Durham area, it depends on where you're at. Like Charlotte, it is a little bit more cumbersome than like Raleigh would be. Cary is very difficult. As you start coming up through Virginia, the Hampton Roads area is a pretty easy area to develop, but you start getting into Richmond, my area of Charlottesville up into DC, it gets a little tougher. So this one we were able to get done in about 6 months, where some areas it could take you 18 months to 2 years. Like my area in Charlottesville, it could be 18 months to 2 years. So find the land and under contract. Now, what I do is very unique. So I put land under contract And I don't close until I get all my approvals, all my entitlements, and all my permits.
Ah,
So I always tie the land up indefinitely till I get all of my approvals, all of my entitlements, and all that stuff. And I got to provide the due diligence check marks as I go along and let them know that I'm moving towards that process. And so I'll put up an earnest money deposit. I'll start the entitlement process, which means I've got to hire the engineers and architects, and I've got to, I got to spend some money to make sure I get this thing approved. But then once I get all my approvals, then I move towards closing. So typically, I get at least 6 months to a year for that due diligence process to get the entitlements, and then 45 days to close once I receive all my entitlements. Because that's when you really start triggering your lending and all that, and
mhm.
you can be ready to go to where you can close something like that in about 30, 45 days.
Very, very cool. So I was already thinking about how you're doing on the interest payment. So you already took care of that, right? You don't close until everything's done. Makes sense. I'm curious, does the earnest money at some point go hard? Because again, you have a seller who's like, is this going to happen or not? Right. So is that
Right.
something you negotiate maybe or they negotiate perhaps? Because I'm sure you don't want it to go hard, but they want it to go hard. And, is that a
Yeah,
conversation?
depending on the project, I get at least 3 to 6 months before the earnest money goes hard. So I have what's called the initial feasibility stage.
Hmm.
So the contract, initial feasibility, 90 to 120 days to determine, do I want to move forward with the project?
Okay.
Once I determine, yes, it's feasible, I want to move forward, then the earnest money goes hard. Then I'm in my due diligence process and entitlement process. And then typically I get 6 months to a year for that. And
Okay.
then once that's complete, then we close on the land. And I
Got it.
tie the contract price to the density that I'm looking for. So if it's a subdivision, I think I can get 100 lots.
Right.
Then I tie my purchase price to that number per lot. Let's say it's $1 million. That'd be, for 100 lots, it'd be, $10,000 a lot.
Right.
So if I get 90, I reduce the price. If I get more,
Ah,
then it's just a bonus.
right.
Same thing with commercial. So in a retail strip center, if I want to build, 15,000 square feet like we're doing here, then I tie that $1 million, an acre purchase price to 15,000 square foot. If I get less, then I break it down, accordingly. And if I
Yep.
get more, then it's just a bonus.
Got it. Protect the downside. I like it. I am curious, the seller of the lot, were they just the person that bought the big track and they're a home builder and they don't want to build retail? Or I'm always curious, you find an opportunity to create value. Why didn't the seller who owned the land before you do the work themselves?
They're just not developers. A lot of people, it could be any number of reasons. This one's just somebody that's had the land for a while
Okay.
and, bought it for an investment and just, sat on it. I mean, I've sold land. I'm a developer, and I've sold parcels of land just because somebody came along and made me an offer
Yeah.
twice as much as I could have made developing it. So
Yep.
sometimes it's inheritance, it's properties in the family for a while. Sometimes it's a developer that's doing the residential and they sell off the commercial. Sometimes it's the other way around.
Okay.
Sometimes it's speculators that'll come in. So a development project happens, and people come in, investors, and they buy the land parcels and they sit on them until the development starts filling out, and then they flip them, to developers on the back end like me, or owner occupants.
Yeah.
So I've run into any and all of those circumstances over the years with buying land.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So now let's paint the picture of today forward. So we saw some vehicles out there moving dirt around. What are the big steps, and when do you think your first tenant is able to move in the future? What do you think?
This is a strip center, so it's just a shell. So it'll probably be, depending on weather, 6 to 8 months before they can,
Okay.
start, thinking about CO and moving into the space. So it starts with the groundwork. So you got to clear the slab. You got to get your footers and foundation work, all your groundworks roughed in. Your plumbing and any electrical that's going to be underground, depending on your tenant requirements. So you've got to get all that roughed in. Then you pour the slab. Then your structure comes in, and this one's mostly steel and glass, pretty straightforward. Then the roof goes on, and then you start your interior partitioning, and your tenants come in and do their build outs. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Typically, you can get them done in about 8 months. The way the market is lately in labor, it's taken about a year, sometimes 14 months to get simple projects done. I mean, even houses, it takes
Yeah.
forever to build houses now. I do infill residential development as well, and I'll build 4, 5, 10 houses here or there, and I think you saw I did a bunch on last time we talked. I was doing some on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, some
Yeah.
coastal houses, and built all those, got them sold, and they took a little bit longer than normal and cost a little bit more. It was interesting. This was during the whole tariff trade war thing,
Yeah.
and I mean every single house, they were only a month apart. Each one went up 5%.
Oh, wow.
It was, yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. All right. So what is your goal? I mean, you're doing so much of this. You clearly enjoy what you do, but when you're done with this,
Uh,
well, let's call it October. I'm just making up dates now. Um, is your intention to own this strip center until you pass on, and you'll pass it on to your as an inheritance? Or are you going to sell it when it's done and take the profit as a 1031? What's your intent with this particular project?
Yeah, so opportunistic is you get in and you get out. So I
Okay.
create the value, I get it all built up, leased up, and then instead of the refinance and keep it, I sell it.
Okay.
So, earlier in my career, I did a lot of that where I'd refinance and I'd hang on to some stuff. But now, cash is king. Where the economy is, where it's going, I like cash.
Yeah.
Um, Especially in the retail sector, I'm not, I don't want to own that stuff long term. It's just too fickle of
Yeah.
an environment right now, and too much competition out there. So I don't mind building it, getting it done, but I'll sell it off to an investment fund, a REIT, something like that, that's looking for those types of cap rate,
Mhm.
yield plays that
Sure.
can be more of a long-term bond type of play. I'm just not interested in that. I'd rather have the cash ready to go to do something else with.
Yeah, so let's talk about that and we'll wrap this up for the first time. This has been so much fun for me. I think we see the world the same way. Cash is king now. I am selling stuff. I'm a buy and hold person, right? That's what got
Yeah.
us there. But some of the stuff I own are C plus, B minus kind of apartments that are hard to manage, and this is the best time, right? Highest occupancy, rents are up. I'm like, sell that thing, and they're in
The
escrow.
most important thing to know is the top, right? So
Yeah.
I made a video the other day. It's more important to call the top than it is the bottom.
Amen. Amen. So I'm right in that, but that's my intention. So let's talk about this cash is king in relationship really to the last 20 years, right? Because I think today it's certainly different than 5 years ago and different than 10 years ago, right? It's just a different
Yeah.
ballgame. So what do you
It
think?
it really is. So yeah, it really is. When I say cash is king, so the dollar is the global standard, right? So everybody comes to the United States for a safe haven. Everybody floods into the dollar for the safe haven. I don't see that changing anytime soon. It hasn't changed in our lifetimes. I don't think it's going to anytime soon. And if the global economy takes a hit, they're all going to come to the United States looking for help, right? So
Yep.
the dollar is always going to be strong. People are always going to need cash. And you want to, as an opportunistic investor, you want to be able to, in a downturn, take advantage of opportunities when they arise. And I'm not saying take advantage of people. I'm just saying there's going to be opportunities in the multifamily sector. There's a lot of yield plays going on right now. People are, it's a fee-based game. So there's going to be a lot of deals that aren't going to perform and meet their business plan. They're going to be for sale, and a
Yep.
lot of the agency loans, they're going to be taking some properties back, and you can pick them up at very good prices if you're in a position to take advantage of those and close.
I couldn't agree more. I sort of because again, what people don't realize, right? We had at least this is my market, Fresno, California, right? Real estate crashed. They got really cheap. We were buying homes for 40 grand, which is less than lot value repeatedly. And then like 2 years later, so that was probably like 2010, like 2011, 12, we started buying apartments, like
Yeah,
medium-sized apartments for nothing down because we were
yeah,
developing the one next door. Like the bank, I remember the one time a bank president came to me and says, "Hey, would you like to buy mine?" I'm like, "What do you mean buy yours?" "Well, we own that one. Do you want that one?" I'm like, "Well, it depends. My cash is." "No, no, you don't understand. We'll do the loan. No money out of pocket. We
yeah,
want you. We want you to escrow 40 grand for repairs, and it's yours." I'm like, "Done."
yeah,
That stuff's coming.
yeah. It is. And if you've got cash in the bank, from a balance sheet perspective, that's what the agencies are looking for. They want to see reserves, like you just said. That's what the banks are going to be looking for. You don't have to put any money. They want you to take the notes over. They just want
Yeah,
they just want that note performing. And as long as you can show them that you've got the reserves and you've got the experience,
yeah,
you can walk into a lot of situations. I did the same thing, back in 2009, 10.
yeah,
After the dust settled a little bit, and there were a lot of really unique opportunities to walk in and take over stuff and be able to take advantage. But you got to have those resources backing you up, and then there's going to be the opportunity to pay cash for things, and
yeah.
you can get deals because you can close quickly. So it's funny. Anytime in the past that I've ever tied up cash long term, I've always regretted it because something would come along where, like, darn it, I need that cash.
Yeah.
Uh, so I like to keep cash moving. I like to be a landlord of cash. It doesn't it doesn't talk back. You don't have to chase it down. You don't have to evict it. Yeah, you know where it is at all times.
I love that. Cash doesn't talk back. You don't have to evict it. That was an awesome line. I love that. Well, great. This has been so much fun. I look forward to doing this every week with you. I appreciate you. How can people follow you, get a hold of you, see what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm all over. GregDickerson.com is my website, and YouTube and podcast are on there. I'm making videos every day, which, I turn into podcasts as well. So yeah, I'm just on a mission. I'm building my education company and, sharing what I've learned over the past 23 years. It's a very unique time right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunities out there. And I think it's going to be interesting, next 3 to 5 years ahead.
Oh, no question. So audience, do yourself a favor, go check out gregdickerson.com, his videos, podcasts, YouTube, all of that. As you can see, he is a wealth of knowledge, fun to talk to. And he just brings a different perspective. So Greg, thank you very much. Thanks for doing this. And we'll talk next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Michael.
All right, buddy.